This narrative relates to Samantha, my daughter. Before I can go into why I'm writing this, I have to clarify the familial dynamics. Married to Judith, 49F, for 17 years, my name is Richard, 51M. We were inseparable ever since we met when we were young. Coming from a shattered household, Judith stayed more at my house than at her own. We grew up near, and my parents adored her like a daughter. From the first, I was in love with her. Each of us comes from humble origins. At 24, we tied the knot. Working as a truck driver, I simply wanted a good livelihood. I never had the money to pay for college. Judith worked as a server at a nearby cafe and skipped college as well. Though not flashy, we were content with what we had. Judith next became pregnant with Samantha. Though it would have strained our finances, she chose to leave her job to stay home and raise our kid. It felt like the appropriate thing to do. I picked up more shifts, worked harder, and did everything it needed to make sure my family was fed. I had been promoted at work, and we were doing okay by the time Samantha turned 3. Though not wealthy, we could afford a decent existence. Back then, things were generally rather decent. Our world was Samantha. Judith appeared happy as a stay-at-home mother. Though occasionally I worked 6 days a week, 14-hour shifts, I didn't mind working long hours. I was doing this for them. Samantha starting school started things to shift. Restless, Judith said she wanted to return to work as she was bored of always staying at home. We decided, after much debate, that I would reduce my hours so I could assist more around the house, and she would have a job. For a while, it was rather sensible. Being the parent Samantha has always wanted, I spent more time with her, helping her with schoolwork and attending her school events. Judith, in the meantime, appeared content working part-time at a recently opened cafe in town. But as the months passed, Judith began to show changes. She was behaving detached, arriving home late, and spending more time at work. She was first adapting to being back in the working world after so many years, but it soon became evident something else was going on. Though we were doing great, Judith started urging me to work more hours and tell me we needed more money. I found it incomprehensible. I loved the balance we had. Time with my kid meant more to me than a few additional bucks. Judith, though, seemed to be growing increasingly unhappy with our way of life. The reality came to me when Samantha was 7. Judith came home late, intoxicated one night, and we got into a big argument. She mentioned she wanted a divorce. I was blinded. I saw not at all what I expected. She admitted she had been seeing Stephen, one of the rich patrons of the cafe where she worked, an affair partner. I broke down. She said she wanted more from life than what I could provide her and that she had been miserable for years. She departed then, exactly like that. She strolled out on Samantha and me to be with him. The days following the divorce blurred. Judith hardly battled for Samantha's custody. She seemed not to want her. She was barely around, visiting now and then and always bearing pricey presents to offset her absence. Raising Samantha on my own, I assumed the roles of both mother and father. Though it was difficult, I did all I could for her. She knew she was loved. Thanks for checking. I assisted her with homework. I even learned how to braid her hair. I never missed a school function, just the two of us against the world, and I felt we were doing okay. Judith had married into money, so Samantha couldn't help but be pulled to that. She adored the presents and the excursions Judith and Stephen arranged when she was a small child. They gave her everything I couldn't. Designer clothing, trips, all the glitter that made me feel like I was failing as a father. I never, however, asked for her happiness. Though Samantha chose her mother's riches over the simpler life I could provide, I wanted her to lead a decent life. Samantha wanted to be a hairdresser when she reached 18, she informed me. I thought she was very good. She plunged herself into her studies once I registered her in cosmetology college. She graduated, worked hard, and started a job right away. Seeing her achieve delighted me, but with time I saw she began to remove herself from me. I first wrote it off as her being busy with her new work, but as the months went by, it became evident she was drifting away. She never really responded when I tried to reach out to inquire whether I had done something wrong. Though we were not close anymore, neither were we alienated. I wanted not to push, even though I felt I was losing her, now a grown-up with her own life. Still, it bothered. Samantha had been my whole universe, and today I felt like a minor actor in hers. Later on, I discovered the fact that Samantha had resumed her contact with Judith. Until it was too late, I had no idea exactly how much Judith's riches shaped her. I was happy when Samantha got engaged some years ago. Mark, her fiancé, appealed to me, and I was excited to be attending their marriage. Though the gap had developed between us, I reasoned that this would be a chance for us to reconnect. But I began to feel, as the wedding was being planned, that my involvement in the event seemed to be declining. Samantha informed me one day she didn't want to perform the customary father-daughter walk down the aisle. She declared it was a patriarchal custom and disagreed with it. Though I suffered, I honored her requests. Her day belonged to her, and I wanted her to be content. 2 days later, though, I discovered by chance that someone would be leading her down the aisle. Simply put, I was not the one. It was Stephen, Judith's boyfriend, the guy she had betrayed. Samantha answered honestly when I asked her whether it was true after some reluctance. Stephen was more sophisticated, Mom informed me, and she doubted I would fit in with Mark's family, who were proper and well off. What I was hearing seemed unbelievable. She was selecting the man who had wrecked our family to accompany her down the altar after I had reared her and given her all I could. I was depressed. I felt most deceived in the worst sense. I told Samantha I wouldn't go to the wedding at all if that was her attitude. I definitely wouldn't be sitting there watching Stephen replace me. I wanted to go somewhere where I would be valued. Saying it would hurt Samantha if I didn't, Mark urged me to come, but I turned him down. I could no longer bear it. More than I ought to have, I drank that evening. I banned Samantha's phone and shut off all connections the next morning. Having done what she had done, I could not stand to see her. I felt wholly and absolutely alone for the first time in my life. Spending the following several days in a daze, I tried to make sense of all that had transpired. Though I couldn't bear Samantha's treatment, cutting her off was the toughest thing I had ever done. I felt as though I had been thrown aside for a man who had only wrecked our family. I was shattered rather than enraged now. On the day the wedding was scheduled, I skipped. I wanted not to know what was going on. I wanted not to picture Stephen escorting Samantha down the aisle, carrying the moment I had dreamed about for years. Thinking about it hurt too much. Hence, I attempted to concentrate on anything else. Still, early that morning, I received a call. Though something in my stomach prompted me to respond, it came from a number I did not know. Samantha was weeping uncontrollably when I grabbed it. Having banned her, she was phoning from the phone of her buddy. Between sobbing, her words were hardly audible, but the main point was obvious. Something had gone badly wrong at the wedding, and she needed my aid. Dad, please, you have to come. Mom ruined everything. I felt a pang of sympathy hearing her so upset, but I was cautious. I asked her to explain what had happened, and it took a while for her to calm down enough to tell me the full story. Apparently, Judith had shown up to the wedding completely drunk. Falling down, slurring her words drunk. She had made a complete scene, flirting with Mark's father, stumbling around and embarrassing herself in front of all of Mark's family. Samantha was mortified, especially since she had been so concerned about appearances and what Mark's well-to-do family would think. According to Samantha, Mark's parents were furious and had even threatened to leave the wedding entirely. She was frantic, trying to salvage the situation, but Judith was making it worse with every passing second. She told me that she needed me to come and fix things, to somehow smooth everything over with Mark's parents and save the day. I listened to her cry and plead, but a part of me felt cold and detached. This was the same daughter who had chosen Judith and Stephen over me. She had stripped me of my role as her father at her own wedding, afraid that I wasn't sophisticated enough, and now she wanted me to come to her rescue? I'm sorry, Sam, I told her, trying to keep my voice steady, but I can't help you with this. She was shocked. I could hear it in her voice. Dad, please, she cried. I need you. I sighed, feeling the weight of everything I had been holding in for so long. You made your decision, Sam, I remarked gently. I wasn't good enough, therefore you wanted me not to escort you down the aisle. Because Stephen would fit in better with Mark's family, you wanted him to do it. She started crying more, telling me that it wasn't what she had meant and that she didn't expect things would end out this way. You now have to live with that choice. I couldn't allow myself to get dragged back into her world, though, where I was only required when everything collapsed. I am not coming, Sam. I have given her so much of myself, and all I have received in return is misery. Your mess to tidy is this. You didn't want me there in the first place. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time after that. My heart ached. I hated hearing my daughter so upset, but I couldn't bring myself to rush to her side this time. She had made her choice, and it had consequences. I had to set boundaries for my own sake, even if it tore me apart inside. She called again about 15 minutes later, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I felt like I was on the verge of breaking down, and I needed to protect what little was left of my emotional strength. After a few missed calls, the phone stopped ringing, and I assumed she had given up. The next day I found out just how bad things had gotten. Judith, still drunk, had caused a massive fight between her and Stephen during the wedding reception. Apparently, she had started accusing him of cheating on her right there in front of everyone. It escalated to the point where she was screaming at him, and he had to physically restrain her. Mark's family had been horrified by the entire scene, and several guests had walked out. Mark's parents were so embarrassed that they refused to speak to Samantha after that. The whole thing was a complete disaster. Samantha sent me an email that night, explaining everything and apologizing for how she had treated me. She told me she realized she had been wrong to push me away, and that she should have let me walk her down the aisle. But the apology came with an undercurrent of blame. She said I should have come when she called, that I should have been there to save the day, regardless of what had happened between us. It hurt to read that. She was still trying to make me responsible for fixing the mess, even though she had been the one to cut me out in the first place. I didn't respond to the email. I couldn't. I didn't have the energy to keep fighting for someone who didn't seem to care about me until it was too late. The days after the wedding were a blur. I spent a lot of time thinking about everything that had happened between Samantha and me, wondering if I had been too harsh and if I should have gone to the wedding despite everything. But deep down, I knew that setting those boundaries was necessary. I had spent my whole life giving everything to my daughter, and it was time for me to take care of myself. I hadn't heard from her since that email. I assume she's still trying to pick up the pieces from the wedding disaster, but I'm staying out of it. I've done everything I can for her, and now it's time for her to figure things out on her own. I just wish things could have been different. In the days following the wedding disaster, I couldn't shake the weight of guilt that settled over me. I had spent all night replaying the call from Samantha, the desperation in her voice, the tears. It haunted me. As much as I told myself that I did the right thing by standing my ground, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if I had failed her when she needed me most. I kept thinking about the email she sent, and how she had apologized but also subtly blamed me for not showing up. It was as if she couldn't fully accept responsibility for her choices, and I had become her fallback. I tried to remind myself that it wasn't my fault things turned out the way they did. Samantha had been the one to distance herself from me, to choose Stephen over her own father. But guilt is a tricky thing. No matter how justified I felt, I still questioned myself. I didn't respond to the email, and I hadn't reached out to her since. I knew if I did, I'd only get sucked back into the same cycle of being there for her, while she pushed me away when it was convenient. But the silence between us was painful. I didn't know if I should reach out and try to mend things, or if I should let her come to me when she was ready. Every day that passed felt like another layer of regret building up inside me. Mark, her new husband, hadn't contacted me either. From what I had heard through the grapevine, things between him and Samantha weren't great after the wedding. Mark's family had been mortified by the scene Judith caused, and they hadn't spoken to Samantha since. Apparently, some of the guests from his side had cut ties as well, and the whole wedding had been marked as a complete disaster. I knew that had to weigh heavily on her, but I didn't know how to help her, or if she even wanted my help. My own life felt stagnant in the weeks after the wedding. I went through the motions of my routine, but it felt hollow. I had spent so much of my life being a father, sacrificing for Samantha, that now, without her, I didn't know what to do with myself. My thoughts were consumed by the past, by Judith, the affair, the divorce, and now this final blow from my daughter. It felt like I had been betrayed by both the women I had loved most in my life, and I didn't know how to move forward. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in my living room, staring at the framed pictures of Samantha from her childhood. There she was, smiling with missing teeth in her first-grade picture. There she was again, standing next to me in her Little League uniform, beaming with pride after a game. Every moment felt like a distant memory, something I couldn't quite touch anymore. I wondered when things had gone so wrong. How had we ended up here? That's when my phone rang. I saw it was my best friend Jim. He'd been a good friend to me through all of this, listening to me vent and offering advice whenever I needed it. I answered the call, grateful for the distraction. Hey, comma man, how are you holding up? Jim asked, his voice full of concern. I sighed. Not great, honestly. I can't stop thinking about Sam. It's like I know I did the right thing, but it still feels like I've lost her completely. There was a pause on the other end, and then Jim spoke carefully. You know, Rich, it's okay to feel that way. You've spent your whole life being her dad. It's natural to want to fix things, even when she's hurt you. But maybe right now, the best thing you can do is give her space. Let her come to terms with everything that happened. It's on her now. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, you're probably right. It's just hard. I know it is. But you've got to take care of yourself too. You've done your part. It's time for her to grow up and realize what she's lost. His words stuck with me long after we hung up. It was the advice I needed to hear, even if it was difficult to accept. Samantha had to figure things out on her own, and I had to let go of the need to fix everything for her. But the thought of her struggling alone after all that had happened at the wedding gnawed at me. I couldn't just sit around and do nothing, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't keep chasing after her, trying to mend something she wasn't willing to repair. In the midst of all this, I started thinking more and more about Judith. It wasn't just Samantha who had betrayed me. Judith had been the root of all of it. She was the one who had walked out on me and Samantha for her affair, leaving me to pick up the pieces. She was the one who had showered Samantha with gifts and luxury, drawing her away from me with material things. And now, after all these years, she had shown up at the wedding drunk and ruined everything for Samantha, the same daughter she had abandoned. I didn't have a lot of contact with Judith after the divorce. She was busy with her new life with Stephen, and I didn't want anything to do with her. But now, after the wedding debacle, I felt a surge of anger toward her that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. She had not only hurt me, but had hurt Samantha too, in the worst way possible. And even though I knew Samantha had made her choices, I couldn't help but feel like Judith was the poison that had infected everything. I spent a lot of time thinking about whether I should confront Judith. I didn't want to dig up old wounds, but at the same time I felt like I needed to say something. For years, I had swallowed my pain and tried to be the bigger person, but maybe it was time to let her know just how much damage she had caused. Not just to me, but to Samantha as well. But every time I thought about reaching out to her, I stopped myself. What good would it do? She wouldn't care. She had never cared. All confronting her would do was reopen old wounds that I had worked so hard to close. I couldn't give her that power over me again. So I pushed the thoughts of Judith away and tried to focus on moving forward. I didn't know how to fix things with Samantha, and maybe I never would. But Jim was right. I needed to take care of myself for once. I had spent years sacrificing for others, and now it was time to figure out who I was without them. I started doing small things to take care of myself. I joined a local biker club that met once a week. It was a way to get out of the house and be around people who didn't know about all the baggage I was carrying. For a few hours every week, I got to be someone else. I made new friends, guys who had their own stories, their own struggles. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged to something outside of my role as a father or ex-husband. One of the younger guys in the club convinced me to make a dating profile, which I resisted at first. I hadn't been on a date in years, and the thought of putting myself out there was terrifying. But after some convincing, I gave in. It was a small step, but it felt like a move toward reclaiming my life. As the days turned into weeks, I still thought about Samantha every day. I wondered if she was all right, if things had gotten better with Mark and his family, or if the fallout from the wedding was still hanging over her. But I didn't reach out. I knew I needed to wait, to let her come to me when she was ready, if she ever was. For now, I was focusing on myself. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, but one I was learning to embrace. After all these years of putting everyone else first, maybe it was finally time to put myself first for a change. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into something of a new normal for me. I was learning to live without the weight of Samantha's choices hanging over me, though the pain still lingered. The hardest part was the silence. Samantha hadn't reached out since that email, and I hadn't responded. I told myself that the distance was for the best and that we both needed time to heal, but it didn't make the ache of losing her any easier. In the meantime, I focused on trying to rebuild my own life. The biker club had become a real source of comfort for me. Every week we'd meet up, have a few drinks, and share stories, and I could almost forget about the mess with my daughter for a few hours. The guys there were a good bunch. No drama, just camaraderie. They gave me space to vent when I needed it and cracked jokes when things got too heavy. In a way, they became the family I hadn't realized I was missing. As for the dating profile, well, I had my first real date in years. Her name was Casey, and she was nothing like Judith. She was kind and down to earth, and we hit it off almost immediately. We met for drinks at a local bar, and while I was nervous at first, the conversation flowed easily. It was strange stepping back into the world of dating after so many years. I wasn't sure if I even knew how to do it anymore, but Casey made it easy. She'd been through her own struggles, having divorced a few years back after her marriage crumbled due to her ex-husband's controlling family. We bonded over the shared experience of difficult relationships, and for the first time in a long while I felt seen. I wasn't just Samantha's dad or the guy whose wife cheated. I was Richard, someone with his own stories, his own worth. The date went better than I could have hoped. We talked for hours, and by the end of the night, I found myself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in months. Casey wasn't looking for anything serious, and honestly, neither was I. But it was nice to feel something again, even if it was just a glimmer of hope for the future. We agreed to meet up again, and for once, I felt like maybe there was life after all the heartache. But as much as I was trying to move on, the specter of Samantha still loomed in the background. I'd find myself thinking about her at random moments, when I'd see a father and daughter at a restaurant, or when I'd drive by places we used to visit together. I missed her, even if I knew that the relationship we had would never be the same. A few weeks after my date with Casey, I got an unexpected call. It was from Mark, Samantha's husband. I hadn't heard from him since the wedding, and I had no idea why he was calling now. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey Mark," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Hey, Rich," Mark said, his tone sounding more serious than usual. I wasn't sure if I should call, but I thought you should know what's been going on. My heart sank. This couldn't be good. What's going on? I asked, bracing myself for whatever bad news was about to hit me. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Mark finally spoke. "Samantha's been having a really hard time since the wedding. Things with her mom, they've gotten worse. Judith hasn't been in a good place, and Sam's been struggling to deal with it. I don't want to get into all the details, but I think she really needs you, Rich." I closed my eyes, the familiar weight of guilt settling back in. I objected to hearing this. "Mark, I don't know. I had tried to protect myself, to set limits, but knowing Samantha was struggling shattered my heart all over again." "Mark," I started, uncertain of what to say. "I get it," he interrupted. "I know things haven't been easy between you two, and I know she's made some bad choices, but I've seen how much she regrets pushing you away. She just doesn't know how to fix it, and honestly, neither do I. But I think she's trying, in her own way. She's just lost. His words hit me hard. I had been so focused on my own pain, my own betrayal, that I hadn't really thought about how lost Samantha must feel too. She had been pulled between two worlds, mine and Judith's, and she had chosen wrong, but maybe it wasn't too late to help her find her way back. "Does she want to talk to me?" I asked quietly. "I think she's scared," Mark admitted. "She knows she messed up, but she's afraid you won't want anything to do with her. She's afraid she's lost you for good. There it was, the thing I had been dreading to hear. The truth was, I didn't know if I was ready to be back in Samantha's life. She had hurt me deeply, and I didn't know if I could handle going through that again. But at the same time, she was my daughter, and despite everything, I still loved her. I quote, "I'll think about it," I finally said, my voice heavy with emotion. Mark thanked me and hung up, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for a long time thinking about everything that had happened. The wedding, the call, the email, and now this. Samantha was hurting, and she needed me. But could I really open myself up to her again, after all the pain she had caused? The truth was, I didn't know. But I did know that I couldn't keep running from it forever. I had to make a choice, one way or another. A few days later, I found myself sitting in front of my computer, staring at the blank screen. I had been avoiding this moment, but I knew it was time. I started typing an email to Samantha, my hands shaking as I put my thoughts into words. Sam, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I want you to know that I love you, and I always will. But you hurt me. What you did at the wedding, the way you pushed me out of your life, it broke my heart. I need you to understand that before we can move forward. I'm willing to talk, but I need to know that you're ready to have an honest conversation. No more avoiding the truth, no more excuses. If we're going to fix this, we need to do it the right way. I'm here when you're ready. Love, Dad. I hit send before I could second-guess myself and sat back, feeling a strange mix of relief and fear. Samantha would reply, or whether she was even ready to have that talk was unknown to me. At least, though, I had moved first. She now had it on her plate. I kept mostly concentrating on my own life in the interim. On another date with Casey, things were going nicely between us. My weekly schedule now included the biker club regularly, and I had even started visiting the gym with several of the lads. Having something to look forward to, something unrelated to the past, made one feel wonderful. Regarding Samantha, I understood that recovery would not come overnight. But for the first time in a very long time, I sensed opportunity. Perhaps just maybe we might find our way back to one another. Though it wouldn't be fast or simple, it was a beginning. For now, that was plenty as well. Story 2. My parents declined to assist me with college. They now depend on me to provide the financing. All right, nothing happens now. Thus, Kevin is my name. I am a 32-year-old mechanic by trade. Although it's not a glamorous profession, it helps me pay the bills, and I do love it. It's entertaining to watch things get mended, and I like the satisfaction of finding a solution. I also don't have to answer to some stupid boss now that I own my own tiny garage. That's not the point of this, though. The point is that my sister Amy plays a major role in the disaster that is my family. Allow me to briefly explain the backdrop. My family wasn't impoverished when I was a child, but we also weren't wealthy. My dad, Rick, drives a truck, and my mother, Janice, used to work at a nearby diner. Not very glamorous. They put in a lot of labor, but they never had a lot of spare money. Because my parents were realistic, I'm still in complete shock at what transpired with Amy. Amy is therefore 3 years younger than me. She's the kid of gold, always You know, the kind who was given everything to her with gusto. She never worked for anything in her life, yet I was supposed to solve problems on my own. It seemed as though she could do no wrong as a child. My parents would do whatever it took to give her what she wanted. But I had to strive for whatever I desired, or I would never obtain it. To be honest, I've always harbored some resentment towards it. How, after all, was I not there? I was doing odd jobs, mowing lawns, kicking my ass, and doing all I could to save money for stuff. Amy was given money to go shopping with her pals or do other things at this time. My folks behaved as though it were nothing. But I promise you, it irritated me. All right, let's go back a little to when I was around 27. I had at last saved enough cash for my own home, just a modest fixer-upper with 2 bedrooms on the outskirts of town, nothing special. It was mine, you know, even though it wasn't in the greatest area. It took me months to tidy up. Painting new flooring, remodeling the kitchen, all of it. I felt pleased with it. That was, after all, the first time in my life that I truly felt like I had achieved anything significant on my own. So that year, I took it upon myself to host Thanksgiving. I reasoned that it would be a wonderful way to reward my family for my diligence. I thus invited my parents and Amy, even though I knew it would be difficult. By then, she had been seeing this real estate guy, John, for approximately a year. This man had a lot going on, or at least that was Amy's constant boast. Beautiful clothing, a fancy automobile, and a downtown apartment full of luxury. Whatever. His money was not important to me. Well done, I suppose. However, I was not prepared for Amy and John's behavior on Thanksgiving. When the time arrives, I've been cooking non-stop, making sure everything is correct and cleaning the house. When my parents arrive, everything goes as planned. We are engaging in casual conversation, catching up, and enjoying appetizers. Then John and Amy show up. Now, to begin with, Amy enters the room with the mindset that she is superior to everyone else. She looks at everything as she strolls about the home, as if she is scrutinizing everything. I felt my blood begin to boil, even though I was trying to let it go. She begins to remark on several things, such as how little the house is, how outdated the decor is, and how unsafe the area is. But she doesn't stop there. She keeps talking about how big John's condo is, how it has floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city, and this amazing security system. I didn't say anything, but I was fuming on the inside. I mean, really, who spends the whole Thanksgiving holiday critiquing other people's homes? Of course, my folks said nothing. They probably simply sat there and thought, "Oh, that's just Amy." I could feel my patience ebbing away. But I was attempting to be the stronger person. She went too far, and I didn't want to start a commotion. She begins by discussing how John covers every expense. She would never have to live in a place like mine, and how fortunate she is to be with him, as in slapping it in my face. At that point, I snapped. "At least I paid cash for this place," I said her as I shot her glance. "I put effort on it. Nothing needed to be paid for by our parents, and I most definitely didn't need to rely on someone else's income to make ends meet. Are you able to say the same?" Amy flushed, and I knew I had gotten under someone's skin. John, who had been largely silent until then, sent me an irritated glance, but remained silent. My folks appeared to be at a loss for what to do as they awkwardly sat there. I was no longer concerned. I was furious. I then ordered her to show herself the door if she felt she was too nice for my house. This place is empty of people. That concluded everything. Without more words, she and John stormed out. Afterward, my parents made an effort to console me by stating things like, "You know how she is, and she didn't mean it." But I would not have it. I was done. I informed them that just because she's family didn't mean I would put up with her nonsense any longer. I didn't speak to Amy again after that. Since then, I haven't seen her, and to be honest, I'm okay with it. Without her in it, my life has been a lot less hectic. However, my parents have never given up on attempting to reconcile with us. They will sometimes bring her up, mentioning things like family's family. Alternatively, "You two ought to let the past go." However, I'm not drawn in. Amy has always been an entitled, pampered child. Furthermore, nothing has altered. That's how it all happened then. I eventually stood up to my sister, and now we haven't spoken in 5 years. Furthermore, I don't miss her. She was a constant cause of anxiety. I also enjoy my life more without her turmoil. All right, so 5 years have passed since the entire Thanksgiving catastrophe. Between Amy and I, things have been rather calm. Sincerely, I assumed everything would remain as it was, and I was quite content with that. Not a single drama or tension. Naturally, though, nothing remains easy for very long. When families are engaged. My mother gave me a surprise call a few weeks ago. It was not out of the ordinary that I hadn't heard from her in a short while. Though we didn't communicate daily or anything, we had been getting along rather well since the entire Amy incident happened. Upon receiving her call, she adds, "Kevin, we need to talk." It's never good when someone says that, is it? My thoughts begin to race, wondering if there was some sort of health issue with Dad, but that's not it at all. She surprises me with this surprise instead. Amy is getting married to John, the same person she dated 5 years prior. The person she was with when she had that nightmare on Thanksgiving? To be honest, I didn't have the best initial response. I groaned a little and responded, "Oh, okay." Considering that, really, what else could I say? Not that I'm interested in Amy's current romantic situation, but I assumed the discussion would end there. Nope. Mom begins gushing about how important Amy's wedding is and how elegant it will be. She is discussing locations, flowers, and everything in between. Naturally, she's thrilled. Amy's parents have always had far greater involvement in her life than in mine. It's simply the nature of the beast. However, she says something that causes me to hesitate. Mom responds, "We've promised Amy that we'll pay for the venue and decorations, but we're going to require some assistance, Kevin." At that, I had to look twice. Hold on, what? Do you require assistance? With what? I questioned, a bit perplexed. She continues as though this is a common request. We need you to assist us afford the expenditures. I will not be dishonest. It completely stunned me. At first, I wasn't even sure what to say. My parents requested money from me to help with Amy's wedding. I haven't spoken to that Amy in 5 years. The same Amy who spent the bulk of our childhoods ruining my life. The same Amy who left my house that Thanksgiving without ever apologizing. I had the impression that I was living in another reality where none of that was significant. Come on, I mean. They actually expected me to contribute to her wedding expenses. Breathing deeply, I tried not to panic. Why in the world would you think I would want to do that, Mom? I asked, trying not to get too stirred up, but maintaining a steady tone. Mom appeared truly taken aback. It's your sister, Kevin. Family supports, kin. At that point, I lost it. I expressed to her my precise thoughts. Family supports, kin. Really. When I needed assistance paying for trade school, where had that enthusiasm gone? You guys did not do anything at all in the past. But now you're asking me to give you money so Amy can get married. I seldom talked to the same Amy. Mother became quite silent after that, most likely because she was at a loss for words. But I didn't stop there. I told her about all the times I was left on my own, and Amy always got what she wanted. How they led her to trample me for years. And now, as if none of it had ever occurred, they are requesting money from me. Mom eventually responded, "It's different, Kevin," after a minute. Back then, we lacked the necessary funds. Not because it was humorous, but just because of how absurd it sounded. I laughed. Do you really believe I have enough money to attend Amy's wedding right now? Are you able to hear yourself at all? You won't get paid a cent for this. You shouldn't have made the pledge if you can't afford it. After that, Mom became combative, claiming they didn't want Amy to think they couldn't help her, particularly in front of John's affluent relatives. They seem to have been making an effort to stay up with his wealthy parents, who are constantly throwing money at the wedding. In order to avoid seeming as though they were lagging behind, my parents wanted to participate. Everything was so flimsy. Really? Does it really matter whether John's family is wealthier? Amy's entitlement and spoilt nature remains unabated. However, my parents were so invested in maintaining this image that they were prepared to ask me for money in order to maintain appearances. I told my mother that I didn't even care about the wedding, that I wasn't going to help, and that it wasn't my job. She attempted to put me under pressure by telling me that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and that helping the family would mean a lot, but I refused to give up. I informed her up front that she was going to have to solve this on her own. She seemed dissatisfied, but I wasn't going to back down. She told me she would talk to her father and come up with a different plan as we finished the phone on a very uncomfortable tone. I was just exhausted from the entire event. After all these years, I couldn't believe they still had the audacity to ask me for money, especially, of all people, for Amy. It just resurfaced every grudge I had believed I had laid to rest following that Thanksgiving altercation. The way my parents have always gone above and beyond for Amy, but I've been forced to solve problems on my own. Nothing seems to have changed. I made an effort to put it behind me during the following several days, but it persisted to bother me. I wondered, in part, if I had overreacted. I mean, it was my parents requesting assistance, and even though they irritate me, I've always tried to treat them fairly. However, this felt unlike the others. They seemed to be going too far. A week later, I was still thinking about the whole situation when my dad called. My dad seldom calls unless it's an urgent matter, so I answered straight immediately. He was direct and to the point. "According to your mother, you won't assist with Amy's wedding." "No," he replied. "Hi there, avoid small conversation. Just dive right in." Yes, it is correct. I spoke as my gut began to tighten. This was going to be a difficult talk, I could tell already. Father sighed deeply. "Kevin, please help us out. We truly need it. We retrapped because we already agreed to pay for a portion of it. It will appear unprofessional if we fail to follow through." Once more, there it was. This fixation with appearances. Amy wasn't even in the picture anymore. Keeping a straight face in front of John's family was the goal. I sensed my rage rising once more. Trying not to freak out, I said, "Look, Dad, the pledges you made are not mine to keep. You shouldn't have promised to pay if you couldn't afford to. I won't come to your aid." Dad took offense at it. He began to talk about how families should support one another and how they have always tried to do what is best for them. However, as he spoke more, I became aware of something. They didn't seek for my assistance because they were in need of it. They anticipated that, which is why they were asking, as though I had an obligation to tidy up their mess. Thus, I interrupted him. Sorry, but I'm not going to do that, Dad. You'll need to come up with another plan. That concluded everything. Similar to the chat with my mother, it ended poorly. I wasn't feeling bad for once, even if they weren't pleased with me. I had tried to maintain harmony my entire life. I wasn't going to let them push me around though this time. Okay, so I figured things would calm down after speaking with my dad. I assumed they would just leave it alone because I had made my position quite clear. Really, what more could they have done? Correct? Naturally though, that isn't how my family operates. It never is. I received this communication from my cousin Mark a few days later. Mark is now one of the few relatives with whom I get along. We've always gotten along well, and he's not into the drama thing. That's why when he messages me, "Hey, can we talk?" I assumed it was something informal, like we were just catching up or whatever. But it was evident when we spoke on the phone that this wasn't the case. Kev, dude, how are your parents doing? Without even trying to engage in the customary small conversation, he inquired. By what do you mean? I answered, feeling a knot in my gut start to grow. I sensed where this was going, but I wasn't going to draw any conclusions just yet. Mark gave a sigh. I spoke with your mother just now, and she seemed rather agitated. She mentioned that the entire family was talking about your refusal to assist with Amy's wedding. The thing I had been dreading was finally there. It wasn't what I expected, but my parents had already told the rest of the family about this, so I guess I shouldn't have been shocked, particularly when their intention was to portray themselves as the victims. It was simply their way. Tell everyone everything you know about the tale, but omit any crucial information that may sway someone's opinion. I made an effort to remain composed as I gave Mark the rundown. Yes, they asked if I could help with the wedding expenses, but I declined. Why would I spend money on Amy's wedding when we hardly ever speak? It is not logical. Mark paid close attention, and once I was done, all he said was, "Man, I get it, I really do. But you are aware of your parents' character. They are giving the impression that you are the source of the issues. The entire family is now discussing it. This is getting a little messy." I realized at that point, this was no longer just about me and my parents. Now that the whole family had been drawn into this, I was being portrayed as the villain. Though I felt my aggravation building, I refrained from venting my anger against Mark. It was not he who was stirring things up. He was only alerting me to something. Fantastic. I rubbed my temples and murmured. Everyone now perceives me as a self-centered jerk. Mark took a moment to compose himself before responding. Yes, that's right. Sort of, Kev. It's not like everyone is aware of the entire tale. All they're hearing are the words of your parents, and you are aware of how easily they manipulate the truth. I gave a sour laugh. Yes, I am aware of their preferred method of spinning stories. After I hung up with Mark on the phone, I was furious. It quotes one thing to argue with your parents, but it's quite another to have them tell everyone in the family about it and then fabricate a tale to make you seem awful. That's a completely new low. I wasn't going to stand by and let them discredit me without correcting their misinformation. I thus took a step that I wasn't sure I would regret. I texted the family as a group. You know the sort of message that you really want to send but hesitate to send because you're so frustrated. Yes, that caliber. I explained the scenario as plainly as I could, but it wasn't ridiculous. Hello, I wanted to address a few points as I've heard a lot of discussion about them. Yes, my parents requested me to contribute to Amy's wedding expenses. I'm not helpful, sorry. It doesn't make sense for me to pay for something I'm not participating in, and I haven't spoken to Amy in years. Although I didn't initiate this turmoil, I won't let guilt scare me into doing something against my better judgment. Regards. It's brief and hopefully sufficient to prevent folks from drawing the wrong conclusion about me. I didn't anticipate an honest response from anyone. All I wanted to do was voice my opinion before rumors spread. Get worse. Naturally, though, things did not exactly go as I had hoped. My phone started exploding up within minutes. My granny called, my aunt texted, and even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a long time sent me a note. The majority of them asked whether everything was well and offered their assistance in a kind manner. which was more like a covert form of curiosity. There were, however, some unpleasant ones as well. I received a lengthy text from my Uncle Gary, who has always been far too involved in the family company, telling me that family comes first and that me clinging on to past grievances was being petty. He continued talking about how Mom and Dad were only trying to do what was best for Amy and that I should pitch in to support the family. Even though it was annoying, I chose not to reply. Talking to someone like Gary would simply exacerbate the situation. My mother then phoned. It was evident in her voice. She was furious. What the devil is going on, Kevin? Why are you messaging every member of the family? Because you've been telling everyone that I'm not willing to assist and that I look horrible, Mom. Just to clarify the air. Trying not to lose my cool, I said. I remained silent. It was untrue, she replied angrily. You're not willing to assist. And now since they can't figure out why you're being so self-centered, everyone is angry. Self-centered? Mom, you had to be kidding me. I am not going to pay for a wedding that I am not even attending. That isn't conceitful. That makes perfect sense, I fired back. Mom sighed into the receiver. Kevin, you're not understanding. Our goal is to ensure that Amy receives the wedding she is due. And now it seems like nobody believes we can cope. Mom, that's not my problem. It was you who gave her all of these promises. You ought not to have made those commitments if you are unable to pay for them. Keep me out of it. For an instant, I believed I had finally reached her since there was stillness on the other end of the call. Then she struck me with this though. Kevin, you're abandoning your family. You quote, going to regret it eventually. I had no idea how to react to that. All I was feeling was fatigue. I'm over guilt trips, weary of the trickery. I'm sick of having to clear up everyone else's mess all the time. So I just apologized. Mom, you feel that way. And for the remainder of the evening, hung up. I simply sat there, gazing at my phone while the alerts continued to come in. I didn't want to argue with my family anymore, but I couldn't help but be upset at how everything had turned into a heated argument. All because I was unwilling to pay for a wedding in which I had no involvement. When I finally went to sleep, I had a realization. There was more to this whole thing than money. It had nothing to do with Amy, the wedding, or even my parents. Really? Control was at issue. My family had always looked on me to be the nice son who never upset the apple cart, to go along, to fall in line, and I didn't this time. Perhaps it explains why they were so enraged. It's not that I couldn't afford the wedding. Rather, it's only that I said no at last. I figured things would calm down after the whole incident with the family texts and my mom's phone call. I didn't really care if folks were still angry with me because I had made my point. I wasn't going to argue further about something that, in my opinion, should be rather easy. My sister's wedding was not being funded by me. Story ends here. However, like with many things involving my family, it wasn't over yet. A knock on my door occurs a few days after the last contact. Since I wasn't expecting anyone, I assumed it was either a delivery or something similar. However, I was really taken aback to see my dad standing there when I opened the door. Let me tell you something though. My dad doesn't always appear in this manner. To be honest, I don't believe he has ever dropped by my house without giving me a call. So I realized immediately that something was wrong. He said, looking a little uncomfortable, "Hey, Kev, is it possible for us to speak?" I nodded and moved aside to let him enter, not sure what to say at first. Not that I wanted to get into another fight, but I didn't really have much of an option. Entering the living room, he kind of looked about as if for the first time, even though he had seen everything before. It was tight, as if neither of us knew how to bring up the subject. What is happening then? When I did inquire, I thought I would let him initiate the conversation. With a sigh, Dad took a seat on the couch. He responded, "I just wanted to clear the air. It's gotten really out of control and your mother is furious." Not knowing where this was headed, but prepared to defend myself if it devolved into another guilt trip, I sat down across from him. "Yes, I did say, I have observed. However, I'm not sure what action you would like me to take. I've already stated my position." Dad rubbed his hands together as if he was searching for the proper words to say. I know, he replied. However, everything around Amy's wedding has grown beyond what was necessary. Kev, we didn't think you would cover every expense. All we were looking for was a little assistance from you. As family, you know. Once more, there it was. Relatives? When they want me to bend, they always use that magic phrase. I made an effort to remain composed, but I could feel my irritation rising once again. I quote, "V already said no, Dad. I'm not against you or your mother. It's Amy's wedding, though. Amy, with whom I haven't communicated for 5 years. I'm not really involved in her life, so it doesn't make sense for me to help." Dad nodded, but it wasn't clear to me that he understood. "I get that, Kev. But your mother, she's having a lot of trouble with this. Amy was promised our assistance, and it's getting messy now. We wish to avoid seeming to be lacking, particularly as John's parents cover all expenses." That's when I understood the true significance of this. It has nothing to do with supporting Amy or even the wedding. It has to do with appearances. The real issue wasn't as important to them as how they seemed in comparison to John's family. They did not want to appear incapable of managing the situation. "Dad, I get it," I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. "That's on you guys, though," you assured her. "I didn't. You made such pledges without consulting me first. And now that it's grown too pricey, you want me to help you out. Sorry, but I have nothing to do with that." Leaning back, Dad wiped his face with his palm. He seemed worn out, as though the entire thing was getting to him. "You're accurate." He acknowledged that we had perhaps bitten off more than we could chew. However, we didn't want Amy to think that we weren't there for her. I exhale, attempting to remain calm, and I understand that. I genuinely do. However, Amy has always had your support. Compared to what you did for me, you have done more for her. And while I don't say it to seem resentful, it is the reality. Thus, when you approach me today, you're expecting me to assist with something that I have no involvement with. It seems off somehow. For a moment, Dad was silent, and it appeared like he was paying attention for the first time. He spoke carefully and replied, "I guess we didn't see it that way. We simply reasoned that perhaps with your assistance, things between you and Amy could begin to improve." That meant things between Amy and me, and I nearly laughed. As though lavishing money on her wedding would somehow end the animosity and quiet that had lasted for 5 years. I told my dad that money couldn't make that better. There are problems between Amy and myself that go well beyond this wedding. You can't just use a check to put a Band-Aid on it. He let out another sigh, nodding as though he understood, but he was still not quite sure. He seemed deflated as he responded, "I guess you're right. I simply don't know how to improve on any of this. It's getting difficult since your mom is so unhappy." That was my dad's peculiarity. Although he wasn't a nasty man, he was always trying to take care of everyone, even when it wasn't his duty, and in the process, he would put himself through unnecessary stress. With my elbows resting on my knees, I leaned forward. "I don't mean to add stress to your lives, but I'm not going to cover Amy's wedding expenses, Dad. I quote, "am not." Simply said, "I'm not responsible for it. Additionally, you two should quit acting like this." With a nod, he turned to face the ground. "Okay, Kev, I understand. We'll work things out." It appeared as though, for the first time in this whole debacle, he may be coming to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to give in, and that I wasn't going to come to my senses and intervene with my wallet to rescue the day. Finally being able to hold my ground, and have him at least recognize it felt nice. Even though I knew it would be difficult to persuade my mother. Dad stayed for a little while later, during which time we discussed many topics, including life, work, and non-wedding related topics. We didn't get to talk like this very frequently, so it was good to simply have a casual discussion with him. But in the end, he had to go. He looked at me as if he wanted to say something more, but he didn't know how, as he got up to leave. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "Take care of yourself, Kev," before leaving. "You too, Father," I answered, shutting the door behind him while seeing him descend the stairs. I experienced an odd combination of relief and annoyance. I was relieved that we had a conversation, but I knew that wasn't it. My mother was still enraged. Amy continued her marriage, and the conflict inside the family was not going to go away quickly. But I'd said enough, at least for now. To be honest, it felt pretty darn nice to know that I wasn't backing down. All right, So following that conversation with my dad, I briefly believed that things may finally calm down. At the very least, he was prepared to give it some space and appeared to understand where I was coming from. However, I ought to have known better. In relation to my family, nothing is ever that easy. After a few days, everything was very quiet. Not a single text or call. Nothing. It was rather relieving at first. I figured at last they were going to back off and give me some room. The stillness seemed strange after that, though. You know that sensation when you have a sneaking suspicion about something, but are unsure of what? Yes, it is true. Naturally, I was correct. One evening after work, I'm just unwinding at home when my phone buzzes. My Aunt Janet sent me a text message. Aunt Janet is one of those relatives that constantly wants to know about everything. Although she has never actually taken sides, she enjoys stirring things up and playing the role of the family's mediator. I knew this was going to be bad as soon as I saw her name appear. "I've been hearing a lot about what's going on with the family," she wrote in her letter to Kevin. "I believe it's time for us to speak." I sighed, wondering if I should even answer. Then, what the heck, I thought. I should give her a chance to speak. Perhaps she saw things from a viewpoint I hadn't thought about. Notice the spoiler. She didn't. It was obvious where this conversation was going from the outset when I phoned her. "Kevin, sweetie, I would simply like to know why you're being so obstinate about getting married." With a voice full of that phony sweetness she often uses before laying on someone, she remarked. "For the sake of the family, wouldn't you think you could provide a hand a little bit during your sister's wedding?" That identical sentence, "for the sake of the family," appeared once again. That was meant to be the secret phrase that enabled me to go for my wallet and erase all the unpleasant experiences I'd had. I tried not to become upset, even though I could feel my tolerance wearing thin, and I reminded Mom and Dad of what I'd previously explained. Amy and I don't have a romantic relationship. Janet, it's been 5 years since we last spoke. Since I'm not even involved in her life, I won't contribute to the cost of her wedding." With a sigh, Aunt Janet seemed to be speaking to a small child who is incapable of comprehending basic reasoning. Kevin, yet. Family is family. It's not necessary to be Amy's best friend in order to show her kindness. Marriages are very important. It's one of those occasions when everyone gathers. This might be your chance to get back in touch. That nearly made me chuckle. Re-establish contact after a 5-year absence, and I was meant to throw money at her wedding in order to do that. It sounded absurd. I apologize, but that is not going to occur. I spoke, maintaining a steady tone. Just because I contributed to Amy's wedding expenses doesn't mean that we would miraculously make things right. That is not how it operates. Furthermore, I won't act as though nothing is wrong between us when it is. For a little while, Janet remained silent, and I had the notion that she could be beginning to understand. I was struck by her thereafter. "Kevin, you're acting really self-centered." That term, self-centered, over the past few weeks, I'd heard it a lot. And it made my blood boil every time I heard it. It was self-serving to refuse to get drawn into a scenario that was unrelated to me. For defending my rights after years of being disregarded and unheard. In what ways am I being self-centered? My voice crisper now, I asked. For years, all I've done is strive to maintain harmony inside our family. I have not spoken. I haven't participated in the drama, and now it's me who is being selfish when I eventually say no to anything. Aunt Janet shook her head, obviously unimpressed by my brief digression. "Kevin, you're missing the broader picture. There is more to this than simply Amy and you. The family is the focus. This breaks the hearts of your parents. All they want is for everyone to get together. And it's my responsibility to provide them with money in order to make it happen," I fired back. "Janet, you know that's absurd. Come on." Once more she sighed, but her tone was more irritated than pleasant. "See, all I'm trying to do is assist. You seem to be exaggerating the situation in my opinion. Okay, if you're dead set on this, just be aware that you're adding to everyone's difficulty." To that, I had no idea what to say at all. Here, there was no room for victory. I tried to explain myself several times, but it was never sufficient. To them, I was always the villain. The one who is the source of issues. I responded, "All right, Janet, I'm tired of this whole talk. I appreciate the conversation." I ended the call before she could answer. I was too tired to do it anymore. I was feeling irritated as I sat there looking at my phone. I'm upset with my parents for including the entire family in this. I'm upset with my family for painting me as the bad guy. Quite frankly, I was a little pissed off with myself for even giving a damn about what they thought. I knew my refusal was the proper one, but I was beginning to feel the strain of it all. I tried to ignore the family drama as I headed to work the following day as normal, but I was mistaken in my assessment. Every time I looked at my phone, there was a new message from a family member, uncles, cousins, and even some folks I hadn't spoken to in years all threw in their 2 cents on the matter. It was noon and I was tired. I decided to ignore everything else and concentrate just on the automobiles in front of me, at least in the garage, so I turned off my phone and stuffed it into my toolbox. Everything made sense. You make a repair. It functions. Easy. Not all of this tangle of emotions that comes with family. That evening when I arrived home, I paused before picking up my phone again. A part of me didn't even want to handle the latest text that had arrived. Naturally, though, my curiosity overcame me. One communication from relatives stuck out among the others. Amy S message. This was not what I had anticipated at all. It had been 5 years since we last spoke. Abruptly, a text message from her appeared directly on my screen. I was unsure about whether to open it or disregard it. A part of me suspected it was just another guilt trip, or worse, an outright demand for money from her. However, I chose to view the notice after gazing at it for a minute. She said, "Short too short. How long will this last?" We hadn't exchanged words. Is it possible for us to speak? It only mentioned that. No regrets, no justification. Only those 3 terms. It was unclear to me what to make of it. I admit that I was curious. Conversely, I was cautious. After all this time, why now? Was she trying to reach out? Was the wedding the reason for it, since I had declined to pay? Or was it something different altogether? I sat there trying to think of anything to say, my finger lingering over the keyboard while I stared at the screen. A part of me wanted to push it away, to stay out of whatever fresh drama this was going to create. However, there was a part of me that perhaps cared, even a tiny bit, and I wanted to give her a chance to speak. I typed a response after a lengthy silence. Yes, and that was all. The door that I had believed to have closed completely let a little squeak. I wasn't really sure what would happen next after sending Amy that brief text. We hadn't spoken to each other at all in the previous 5 years. She's suddenly in the mood to converse. It didn't feel right. There had to be more to it. But I had no idea what to anticipate. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be honest. After a few hours, I began to suspect that perhaps she would not really reply. Perhaps all she wanted was to appear as though she tried. Alternatively, perhaps she was awaiting my next move. In any case, I was content with the quiet. Of usual, though, my phone buzzed again right as I was starting to unwind and enjoy my evening. It was Amy. She had answered. "Can we get together? I'd like not conduct this over text." I spent some time gazing at the message. I'm not sure how to react to it. I was curious in part. Yes, while part of me had been waiting for an answer for years, the other half of me was still harboring resentment and fury. I wasn't sure whether I was ready to see her in person, especially not with the wedding planning still looming large. Ultimately, though, I reasoned that I would never truly find closure on this whole thing if I didn't meet her now. So I quickly replied back, "Okay, where and when would it be?" In the end, we decided to get together the next day at this tiny coffee shop downtown. Just a peaceful spot where we could have a conversation. Nothing too elaborate. The next day I could feel the same old knot in my chest as I went in. It had been years since I'd seen Amy, and I had no idea what to expect from this talk. When I went in, she was already seated at a table and was glued to her phone. When I got close to her, she glanced up, and for a moment, we simply uncomfortably gazed at each other. She had changed appearance. Not in a negative sense. Just more mature, I suppose. Seeing her after all this time was strange. "Hey," she murmured. "Hello?" I took a seat across from her and answered. There was a lot of tension, as if none of us knew where to begin. She sighed after a protracted silence. "Look, I get why you're upset. I know our relationship hasn't been great. I think I deserve it. I was not expecting that. I had anticipated that she would ask for money up front, and perhaps even get right into wedding talk. However, here she was, owning up to her mistake." I nodded, allowing her to continue since I had no idea what to say. "I made a lot of mistakes. I understand that, and I'm not requesting that you forget anything. Rather, I was hoping to make some progress before it was too late. I reclined in my chair and gave her remarks some thought. There was a part of me that wanted to be doubtful, to think that she was merely stating this to get something from me. However, another part of me noticed how sincere she appeared. Perhaps, just perhaps, she genuinely wanted to put things right. I answered finally, "I don't know, Amy. Numerous things have occurred. All of it cannot be undone by a simple apology." Glancing down at her hands, she gave a nod. "I must try, even though I know." I came to the realization that perhaps this wasn't about the wedding for the first time in a long time. Perhaps there was a deeper meaning to this.